Inglourious Basterds really needs no introduction. I mean, the opening sequence alone has so much skillful, analysis-worthy subtle depth that Quentin Tarantino himself labeled it the highlight of his career. That being said, this video concerns itself with perhaps the most memorable Nazi killer in the movie. Kinda, you'll see soon enough. I'll let the Tennessee bootlegger himself introduce him.
Sergeant Hugo Stiglitz.
Ah, it never gets old. Hugo Stiglitz, played by Till Schweiger, is a German defector and prominent member of the Bastards. Although we don't get much exploration into his character as a whole, he quickly cements himself due to his fervent disdain for the Nazis, which is thoroughly put on full display, until he meets an unfortunate end at the hands of Eric, the bartender. Although some speculate that he escaped the bar, wounded but alive. Either way, let's take a step back for a moment. Stiglitz's first scene, Stiglitz's. Hugo's first scene, arguably his most iconic for its overall bombasticness, is truly a sight to behold, being comprised of heavy metal guitar riffs coupled with a brief montage of Hugo's assassination victims. Damn, this looks like shit. One sec. Ah, much better. As it would turn out, all the listed victims in this briefly shown German newspaper are not who they are reported to be, at least for the most part. Starting from the top left, the names of these men are Georg Karl Wilhelm Friedrich von Kukla. Fuck me. Quick synopsis. Kukler served in the German army in both world wars, but is arguably remembered mostly for his service in the German invasion of Russia, during which he held the rank of general and later field marshal. His most noteworthy command during the war was his leadership of Army Group North from 1942 to 1944, until he was replaced by Walter Model, who is also conveniently on this list. At the end of the war, Kukler was indicted for war crimes in the Soviet Union and found guilty, and sentenced to 20 years in prison, of which he served 8 years. He was released in 1953 and died in 1968. Our second supposed Gestapo officer was actually a German general by the name of Ernst-Günther Baade, who just like Kukler served in both world wars. This will become a common theme. He served in Italy and North Africa, but his most distinct attribute was his liking for Scottish culture. He was purportedly known to don a kilt and even carry a claymore. Wrong claymore. He died on May 8, 1945, the day of the formal German surrender, not long after a British fighter strafed his car in Holstein. Holstein? Fuck it. Our next man, Georg Lindemann, another veteran of the Great War, like our previous Georg, served mainly on the Eastern Front. He commanded several posts throughout the war, in Army Group Center and North, even managing to take full command of Army Group North for a few months in 1944, before he was relegated to the Reserve Army for some time, until he was made Supreme Commander of all German forces in occupied Denmark. At the end of hostilities, Lindemann was kept in command by the Allies to oversee the dismantlement of all remaining German forces in Denmark, until he was arrested on June 6, 1945, and imprisoned until his release in 1948. He died in 1963. But he did have a city named after him for 4 years. So, yeah. Our next figure bears a decent resemblance to Friedrich Zola. Erich Bernfanger, who also happens to be the youngest person in this newspaper alongside Friedrich Lang, served in the Wehrmacht and participated in most of the prominent German ground invasions in Europe, including Barbarossa, Fall Gelb, and Fall Weiss. Bernfanger, a committed Nazi, met his end during the Battle of Berlin, where he committed suicide on May 2nd. The next officer is our first SS member. This is where things get interesting. You see, after translating the newspaper, I came up with a total of 12 names and ranks, of which only 9 matched a photo, leaving 3 victims unidentified. These 2 might be a special case, but as far as the only Waffen-SS officer, the trail has run cold. But for the sake of a potential clean sweep, I'll leave the remaining names in the description for my humble viewers to delve deeper into. Happy hunting. Back to the regular German army, our next sauerkraut sandwich lover goes by the name of Helmuth Maede, serving almost exclusively on the Eastern Front, or the Western Front if you're Russian. He was a part of Army Group South, fighting all the way to Stalingrad. Yeah, you can see where this is going. Fortunately for Helmuth, due to a serious injury, he managed to get airlifted out of the cauldron in 1943, where he was subsequently placed in the Führer Reserve as he recovered until early 1944, when he was appointed command of several units in the east in a vain attempt to hold off the Russian juggernaut. With everything going to shit in December 1944, the Germans attempted to recreate Fall Gelb 4 years before, with Operation Wacht am Rhein, or Watch on the Rhine. Mader participated in and survived this battle as well. Side note, so Mader is probably one of the only people who has the unique privilege of surviving Stalingrad and the Battle of the Bulge. Anyhow, after the Ardennes offensive, Mader fought on the Eastern Front for the rest of the war, eventually surrendering to U.S. forces only to be turned over to the Soviets. He was held in captivity until 1955. However, the end of World War II would not signal the end of his military career. He later went on to join the Bundeswehr. He died in 1984. Tying back to what I said earlier about these two being special, we arrive at our second SS man, a certain John Waters, an actor who plays this SS officer. Or at least somebody that looks like him. Oddly enough, it seems like John is the only man they made an authentic photograph of for this scene, unlike every other photo here. Although it could be just as likely that they chose a photo of a real SS officer that resembled John Waters. I'll let you be the judge. Personally, I'm going to say that it was him, just so that we're certain on how he died. And because, I mean, come on, they might as well be twins. Hans von Obstefelde is the next army general on our list, serving in both World Wars. In World War II, he was involved in the infamous Baba Yar massacre during Operation Barbarossa. He later led forces in Operation Nordwind, Germany's last major offensive on the Western Front. I was unable to uncover whether or not he surrendered or was captured by Allied forces upon the conclusion of the war in Europe. Either way, he lived until 1976. Now arriving in our last potential actor photograph, who seems to resemble the first SS officer killed by Stiglitz, played by Udo Kier. Personally, I don't see as much of a similarity as I do with John Walters. Just like last time, we're either dealing with a strategically chosen look-alike, or a photo of the actor himself. Now down to our last three. The next figure was once a Stuka dive bomber ace by the name of Friedrich Lang. He served all throughout the skies of Europe, reportedly flying 1,008 total combat missions without being shot down once, managing to obtain the rank of major. After the war, he went on to join the post-war West German Air Force, also called the Luftwaffe. He died in 2003. Moving on, our next Krautberger is Günther Lützow, who is coincidentally another Luftwaffe ace. His baptism of fire came during the Spanish Civil War. This early experience would serve him well throughout World War II. He went on to fight in the French campaign, Battle of Britain, and in the Soviet Union, where he accrued most of his aerial victories. At the end of the war, he got the opportunity to utilize the brand new ultra-modern Me-262 jet fighter. After enjoying some limited success with the fighter against the US AAF, he went missing in action in 1945 near Donauwörth while intercepting an American bomber. His body and fighter still have yet to be discovered to this day. At the end of his lifetime, he was credited with 110 aerial victories, reaching the rank of Oberst. With Lützow covered, we are left with perhaps our most consequential figure by far. Termed Hitler's fireman, it's Walter Model. No, Model began the war as an Oberst in 1939, though it was in 1941 where he would become renowned for his abilities in defensive warfare, proving instrumental in countless critical operations that undoubtedly prolonged the war. His defensive trademark first came to prominence when he helped to prevent the rout of Army Group Center in the wake of the German assault on Moscow. In the following year, he proved equally instrumental in the defense and consolidation of the Rzhev salient. While commanding the German Ninth Army, he defended against multiple Soviet offensives, strengthening Army Group Center. As the war dragged on into 1943, and as the tide of war began to change against the Germans, Model was forced to abandon the Rzhev salient in favor of a less tenuous front line, and to free up more troops. Over the course of this withdrawal, Model sanctioned a localized scorched earth policy and a mass partisan liquidation effort. In doing so, thousands of mostly unarmed civilians were shot, working-age men were deported west, and multiple villages were razed to the ground. For these actions, the Soviets would label him as a war criminal. In July 1943, the Germans would launch their last major throw of the dice in the east, codenamed Operation Citadel. The offensive would pursue the objective of encircling and destroying Soviet forces within the Kursk salient. Walter Model was tasked with leading the northern pincer of this assault. As the battle progressed, the Germans gained only limited ground, and in doing so weakened and exposed themselves to a massive Soviet counterattack. This duly occurred with Operation Kutuzov. In preparation for this, Model ordered the construction of multiple defensive lines, preventing the Soviets from achieving an immediate breakthrough and granting the Germans valuable time to withdraw. For this, his reputation remained intact. What followed in a nutshell was a complete Uno reverse card to everything the Germans achieved in the last 3 years of fighting. Over the course of the retreat, Model commanded the majority of the army groups in the east, at least once. By July 1944, Model had managed to halt the Soviets just outside of Warsaw. On the other side of Europe, the Allies were beginning to make further gains in France, and with the former commander of Army Group B being displaced, Model was appointed leader to salvage the situation, which he did by retreating, saving as much of the shattered Army Group B as he could before reaching the border of the Reich. With the war in the West developing into a stalemate, and aiming to bring a quicker conclusion to the war, the Allies launched Operation Market Garden, a series of paratrooper drops all across Holland with the objective of securing key bridges, ultimately allowing the Allies to break out into the northwest plain of Germany. In response, Model deployed the 2nd SS Panzer Corps to eliminate this threat, wiping out the majority of the 1st Airborne Division in the process, and retaining vital control of the bridge at Arnhem. This helped to cement the failure of the operation, ensuring a prolonged conflict on the Western Front. At the end of 1944, Model participated in Hitler's last throw of the dice. In the West, that is. Hitler had hoped to capture the Allied port of Antwerp, cutting off vital resources to the Allied front, with the end goal of bringing the Allies to the negotiation table. To further this aim, Model was appointed leader of Germany's last strategic reserve. As the battle developed, chronic fuel shortages and fierce American resistance forced the attack to stall. By December 25th, with the writing clearly on the wall for his doomed offensive, Model withdrew his remaining forces. The battle ended on January 8th. This defeat gave way to major Allied advances in the following year, so much so that Model's entire army group was encircled within the Ruhr industrial region. With the virtual collapse of both the eastern and western fronts, and no clear route of escape, Field Marshal Model took his own life on April 21st, 1945, leaving behind a distinguished yet unforgiving legacy. And with that, we've officially covered every man in the newspaper. As a whole, we can deduce by examining the personal history or uniform of each individual that only 2 of these men potentially fit the description of Gestapo officers, even though neither of these men are actually wearing a Gestapo uniform. Keep in mind there was no actual standard Gestapo uniform. Due to their role as secret police, most active duty members wore some variation of civilian clothing, including leather coats, like we see with Dieter Hegström. However, these men are clearly wearing paramilitary SS uniforms, which I believe to be the iconic black Allgemeine SS uniforms. The best comparison I can make is to another uniform we see Hellstorm wear in the bar scene, which itself appears to be an amalgamated uniform of both the Allgemeine SS and the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler Division. But I digress. The point is that both Allgemeine SS and Gestapo members often held dual ranks within other SS services, so seeing these men in the uniform of another SS branch for a photograph does not necessarily mean they are not Gestapo members. I hope that didn't sound too complicated. So in review, we have 9 definitive members of the Wehrmacht, 1 member of the Waffen-SS, and 2 members of the Allgemeine SS, and or Gestapo, or both. To conclude, I know these images are pretty much just supposed to act as placeholders for this brief scene, and in making this I've completely overanalyzed it, but I kinda just said fuck it anyway, because I love this movie. Even still, I hope this overzealous scene examination / character dive sheds some light on an already great character introduction. Take it away, Aldo.
Something you, Rich? I think this just might be my masterpiece.